Hey, this is Chuck, and you are listening to Fans with Bands, the podcast where we talk to the fans and the bands they dig about life, music, and whatever the hell else we want to talk about. Today on Fans with Bands, we're talking to Head Full of Ghosts. Check it out. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Fret Rescue. Located in Southeast Michigan, Joe at Fret Rescue has over 17 years of experience as a journeyman luthier. From basic setup to major repairs and restorations, you can put your trust in Fret Rescue. Contact Fret Rescue via email at fretrescue@gmail.com. You can also find them on social media by searching for Fret Rescue, @FERTRESCUE. That's Fret Rescue. Hey, this is Chuck with Fans with Bands, and I'm talking to James and Brian from Head Full of Ghosts. How are you guys doing?
Great.
Good.
Awesome. You know, first I wanted to thank you for reaching out and getting in touch with me. And I went and checked out 1023, the most recent album you guys have released. It is super. I was just like, wow, this is so cool. Love you definitely have the 90s bringing it into the current realm in terms of because I heard, flavors of like Our Lady Peace, or not flavors, I should say influences. It just reminded me of those bands that I loved back then. So Our Lady Peace and Tonic, a little bit of the Verb Pipe, stuff like that was like super cool. So it was very, definitely enjoyed listening to that album.
Thanks.
Yeah.
We're James and I think that's our sweet spot, was that era. And in some ways, we could, at least I know myself, I could be stuck there at times. Not to say that new stuff isn't great, but it's just, there's so much to pick from in that
Oh, yeah.
90s era, and across all spectrums of rock and pop and soul and all the different kinds of music that were so big back then, that seemed like they all had these huge icons during that era. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of our sound gets derived from our love with all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it comes through, and I think it's very, number one, the recording, at least on 1023, is fantastic. I mean, you guys did great on the other ones. The 645 or 654, and what was the other one, 321 or something like that?
Yep.
I got to ask you guys about that too. But the recording on this one is fantastic. The instrumentation is great. You guys are talented musicians, but the songwriting, I think, is very, very good. And I love the fact that it brings up some of the nostalgia of that earlier music, but you guys are putting your own unique spin on it, and it's fabulous. So I was curious. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, James. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just going to say it's really a little bit of an amalgamation of all those things in the 90s that we listened to. I always tell people that that's like the greatest era of music for any genre.
Yes.
Soundtracks too.
Yeah, hell yeah, for sure. That's true. So let's wind it back. How did Head Full of Ghosts come to be? How did the band form? And how did you come up with that name? Because I think that's cool too.
Yeah, I was kind of getting back into the singer-songwriter thing. Just playing wherever I could play, and I ended up at Ipsy Ale House a lot. And I kept noticing this other guy showing up, and his ears percolating when I would do an Alice in Chains cover, or something a little offbeat than the typical Johnny Cash, Elton John, whatever else cover you may be doing in a bar that night.
Right.
And so we just got to chatting, and then Brian, I think, was in like 40 bands when I first met him.
Something like that.
So it took a little time to figure it out, but we kind of had this idea when we started Head Full of Ghosts to like have a very small footprint, be able to be tucked in the corner of a bar, be all acoustic. He played like a cajon, and I just did acoustic guitar, and we ended up finding a bass player who played acoustic bass, and we did that for a minute. But as we kept going back to the songs, as we kept going back to the well, we just kept plugging more and more stuff in, and more drums showed up, and then we just ended
Yeah,
up getting real loud.
the cajon grew from a cajon to a sort of a bassy cajon, and then there were some congas and bongos added, and then a foot cabasa, and then a kick pedal. And I mean, it was eventually gonna just grow into a drum kit anyway. But we put the acoustic project together, and this was just pre-pandemic.
Okay.
So we were really just getting rolling initially, and started to do a couple shows, and then the pandemic hit and everything shut down, and we were super bummed just because we were all in the midst of everything with the rest of the world as to what you could even do or could you see
Yeah.
anybody. So we were all sort of sequestered at home, and that's where we came up with the idea to try to do an EP or an album autonomously. So the three members at the time had some recording capability at home, so we would just try to track things, email them to each other, line them up to clicks, and put a record together that way. And then fortunately, we had a friend of James's who was a really good sound engineer, kind of put that whole thing together for us, mix it, and that's how we got the first 3-2-1 album. So
Oh,
that was
yeah.
totally done autonomously. We were never in a studio together. I think there was one point toward the end where we were able to get together masked and sort of put a couple recordings together in the same room, but for the most part it was glued together through emails. And so that was kind of our pandemic record,
Nice.
and that was getting a lot of James's songwriting out and sort of starting to compose those songs a little bit. And you'll notice that obviously we've revamped quite a few of the songs on that album now in the contemporary band format.
Yeah,
So
because that 3-2-1 was acoustic, if I
yeah,
Yeah.
entirely.
Yep. Yeah, which I thought it sounded cool. It was, I started most recently and worked my way back. So when I got to that, I was like, oh, they started off as an acoustic band. Cool.
Yeah.
Or I thought, well, I wasn't sure if you started that way or if, you just, we were just going to do acoustic, right? And you were an electric band all along.
Yeah, and it's kind of a running joke in a sense, because a lot of times bands will put out a few albums and then maybe they'll do like an acoustic version.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
it's
jar
totally
of
opposite
flies.
for us. So we don't have to do that.
Yeah, you've kind of taken you hit that one right at the you
Right
hit the
away.
bud right at the
Yep.
band. Yeah, that's awesome. Um, so, how did you come up with the name Head Full of Ghosts?
That's a James question.
Yeah. I kind of I've always thought of like songs as kind of like ghosts,
Oh,
just like things from all parts of your life, whether it's a passing conversation or um things you remember, and just things you remember when you felt something. And it just, I don't know, that image just kind of came in my head, just like all these ghost like things walking around. So getting them out there, out of
nice.
your having your head full of them.
Awesome. Yeah, and I suppose there's something to that in that tunes can haunt you, right? They can
Yeah.
they can kind of just stick with you, or in a good or bad way, right? They could be something that's a memory that's kind of trips something, but you get it out through the music, which is great. Or it's something that just kind of like an earworm just drills in there, and your next thing you know, it's like, why is this song always here?
Yeah. No, it's crazy the way they continuously creep up. I mean, some of these songs are very old songs, and some of these songs are like brand new songs. Um, so I mean, to your point, earworms.
Yeah, for sure. So, what's the songwriting process like for you guys? All right, I mean, obviously during the pandemic, that album was kind of pieced together. Um, has that evolved over time? And sort of in line with that, are you, I guess, building the songs, does somebody come like James or you, Brian, with a full-fledged tune and the rest of the band kind of works it out to its final form? Or is it more, let's get together and jam and come up with some riffs and then see what sticks?
I think I think for the most part, I construct a lot of the skeletons of the song. But I really do try, especially when writing for this band, I try to keep the bones very bare. Like I'll use like a lot of open chords and things like that because after you play with guys for a little while, you can start to hear what, Jeff's going to throw in on bass, what Ken's going to do on guitar, and what what kind
Yeah.
of backline Brian's going to bring to the whole thing. So you end up your songwriting kind of gears towards like who you're playing with because you're inspired by them.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
so there's times where I think I've had a complete song and we just like almost just kind of like learned it. There's other times where we've taken songs and ripped them apart and threw them all back together.
And do,
So
yeah, and what do you think? Is there a particular have you have you changed that approach at all, like from 3-2-1 up to 10-23? Has that evolved over time?
I think there's a better familiarity. At least I know with like Brian and I remember us getting together when we first started working on Chokehold, and that song was a finger picked slow ballad.
Oh.
Um, and now it's got crashing toms and whammy
Yeah.
pedals, and so we just said let's just take this song and like flip it on its head. And we just spent an evening crushing that out in a basement.
Nice. Nice. Very nice.
Sometimes I think that it's hard to describe to other people, but I know that sometimes I feel like I enjoy listening to our record more than anybody because I remember how some of these songs initially started
Oh, cool.
and then
Very
seeing where they're at now. So hearing James do a singer-songwriter version of some of these songs many years ago and then hearing them now, I mean, I don't know that I have recordings of those original versions, but it's really amazing to hear what everyone has put in to change those songs to be what they are now. And it's cool to look back and be like, God, how did we get to this song the way it is in its current form? And Chokehold is definitely a good example because none of us saw that coming. I mean, that was one of the newer songs that I feel like we constructed as a band, um, really from the ground up, based off of an initial idea that James had that was a totally different direction.
That's cool.
Um, so
Yeah, I
I
think
would say that the writing has changed a little bit, in that sense. And like James said, when you're working with a more open palette, knowing that everybody's going to be putting their spin on things, he knows to leave a little room for chaos because it's going to happen. So
Yeah, I think even taking it from, the finger pick slow ballad it was to whatever Brian and I constructed, it's one song I remember sitting at practice where, I mean, we devoted a lot of time to the going into certain parts and out of certain parts. And,
Yeah,
it was a cool experience because everybody was really pushing their voice on that.
that's cool. And it's interesting that you took a I've seen it done where someone will take a more dynamic, potentially heavier song and strip it down to be an acoustic, but to take a more stripped down and different vibe completely, and then flip it up. That's interesting. I don't know if well, I mean, who knows? There could be other bands that have done that, and I just don't know it. But uh, I can't think of any right now, right offhand. That's a cool way of doing song development.
yeah,
That was definitely the idea.
yeah.
Awesome.
And I think there's a nod to that in our recordings too, because so many of them have an acoustic guitar somewhere in there, whether it's in the front of the mix or it's kind of buried in there.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like we pay homage back to the originals in some ways because you can still pick up some of that clicky, slappy acoustic sound, and in some ways it kind of warms out the tone a little bit, and not everything is necessarily driving and heavy.
Yeah.
Um, So yeah, it's buried in there on just about everything, I think.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I enjoyed about your music is the nuances in it, in the song construction, the sounds that you're using, um, and big shout out. Is it Ken that's playing bass? Uh,
And it's good.
Jeff.
Jeff. So
Yeah.
Jeff's bass guitar is fantastic on 1023. That's like awesome, super good.
Yeah,
I
I
love to
think
hear that.
yeah, I think one of the coolest things is because I was there for every single session in the studio, as everyone was recording parts. And, I remember watching Jeff basically do every bass track. And it was just so cool to see his influences, like little songs that he may have mentioned, bands
Yeah.
that I knew he listened to
Hmm.
way back in the day. Because Jeff and I went to high school together. Um, and like he brings that into the songs, and they're not necessarily, I would say Brian and I listen to 90% of the same bands. and and Jeff's probably sitting at about 50% with us. And then Ken, maybe even less. And that's what's cool about both of them and the inflections they bring into the music and all the songs is I really feel like not only is everyone's influences put into our music, but I also think their interpretations of everyone else in the band's influences are also on display.
Yeah, for sure. I think it. I think it's important. I mean, I don't know how widely dispersed it is among bands, but I do think it's important to have a variety of influences. If just for uh, variety, because typically as music fans, you're just like, oh, what are you listening to? What are you listening to? And just trying shit out because it could resonate, may not, but it's to me that's part of what's fun about music is you can explore it and somebody can take a different riff on, you know, some classic or come up with something that's, completely unique or, a spin off of something that's been done, but it's still a different, there's just little changes that make it just unique and fun. So
I've
I,
been in, uh,
go ahead.
sorry, what was that? Oh, I was
Go
gonna
ahead.
say, no, I've been in bands like a long time, and I always thought it was funny. This is the first band where like, someone will ask like, "What does that lyric mean?" or "What is the song about?"
Nice.
Yeah. And as a songwriter, you're like, "That's awesome."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that kind of brings up a question though. Do you, when you're writing the songs and lyric content, do you have any hesitations about giving away what the meaning of the song is, or are you happy to say, this is exactly what I was thinking?
I think it varies. There's sometimes I like to just put it right out there. There's other times I've always enjoyed um, when a song can mean something different to everyone,
Yeah.
you know? Um, so there's times I'll keep a concept vague or, intentionally let it be something that can mean something else to somebody else.
Okay.
But as long as that emotion is there and they get where it's coming from, um, I have had people go, "Is Wash Us All Away a Jesus song?" I'm like, read the
I,
lyrics, man.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know about that. I guess maybe the second coming. I don't
Yeah, right.
know.
Uh,
I
So
think sometimes the
go ahead.
music, at least for me, it can kind of timestamp an era in your life, and whether you knew what the song meant or what it was truly about, um, there's always that nostalgia. You remember driving in your car and hearing it for the first time, falling in love with it, and then you sort of have an era of that song and what it reminds you of, and then it's interesting later to find out what the song was really about. So I guess to James's point, it's I think it can be both. It can really be something that you fall in love with first for your own reasons, and then you follow up with it and see what it was really about, and see if that sort of transcribes into your emotional attachment. But that's usually how it works for me anyway, is I might fall in love with something first, really have no idea what the true meaning is behind it
Yeah.
all. And then if I really care, then I start kind of digging. So
Yeah.
um, hopefully other people can find that attachment to what we do too.
Yeah. I think that's great. I love it when there's directness in tunes and a little bit of vagary. One of my most favorite songs is "Can't Find My Way Home" by Blind Faith, and I'm not exactly sure what the fuck he's talking about, but I just
Right.
love that tune.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's just so good. So this is a tough question because it's probably like picking between children. But what is your each of your favorite cuts off of 1023?
Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
I know it's tough. If you want, I can throw out mine for you, and that would be "Privilege," which I think is awesome, and "Static." Really, those two tunes stood out for me. Oh, and um, James, the one you were mentioning, "Wash This All Away," is very different from your other tunes.
Yeah.
Like, so that was intriguing as well because I was like, "Huh, what is going on here?"
Well, good. Then it did its thing.
All right.
Right.
Because
Right.
we were in the studio listening back to it, being like, huh. If there's a studio song on, I mean, they're obviously all studio songs, but if there's like a song that was kind of like constructed and kind of put together in the studio a little bit, it would be that one for sure.
All right. Very cool.
I think "Privilege" for me,
Cool.
is probably my favorite song on the record. Um, and then I was super excited with the way "Waiting on a Storm" came out. It's a little bit of an older song
Mm-hmm.
of mine, but I really love everyone's playing on that. I had some headphones on the other day just listening to that while I was mowing the yard, and I
Nice.
was like, I was, I was just like, man, everyone kicked ass on this song.
Fantastic. Brian, how about you?
Yeah. Yeah. It is really tough because um, I really like our song order on 1023.
Mm-hmm.
And the first song, She's Undecided, is sort of the quick, upbeat, feel good song of the record.
Yeah.
And sometimes I really like to hear that right away. So I do a lot of listening to music to and from work. And if it's first thing in the morning, sometimes I think I need that first positive kick. And
Right.
it's very to the point. It's, you know, so that song just makes me feel good, which is and it's fun to play. So that's I guess where I'm going back and forth is not so much just what's my favorite song, but it to be in the band.
Yeah.
I love playing Static, for instance.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, it's a little more close to some things that I would listen to just every day. And I love the changes and sort of the mood and the inflections. And then the parts that I wrote were, I kind of wrote them to serve the song, but also to sort of just be fun to play. Um, so I guess, Static would have to be up there, but I have to agree that, Privilege, when I listen back to it, just feels like a big embodiment of work, and it's so grand and it's
Yeah.
so big. And if you listen to, for instance, the cymbals on that song, um, Dave Roof, who we haven't mentioned yet, but the guy is just incredible.
Yeah. He
I don't
is.
remember exactly how we came to the conclusion, but we put some was it flanger, I want to say,
Yeah.
Oh, on the
on the
cymbals?
cymbals themselves.
Yeah.
So when they crash, they kind of wash and they do this thing, and it's just it added to that huge mountainous chorus feel. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of right there with you guys on Privilege too. And and then I guess I go back as a player to like Chokehold because of all the it's one of the heavier songs on the
Mm-hmm.
record, I guess, and a little more complex from the drum standpoint. So it's another one that I just love to play, love to get into it. So yeah, it's tough because they're, like you said, they're kids, they're all my favorite kids.
Right.
But there's some that I really just enjoy listening to, and then there's some that I just really enjoy playing. So
Cool.
yeah, that's difficult.
I do want to give a little shout out. So we got some fans on. So there's Ash, Dina, and then Brian's mom and dad, the singers. So if you guys, you're all muted right now, but if you have questions, you can throw them in the chat. Or if you just want to add any comments, just feel free to unmute and say, "Hey, Chuck." Um, so the numbering. Yeah, 3-2-1 was the first one, 6-5-4 was the second one, and now 10-23. So, what is up with the numbering of these albums?
So 321 miles. That was the distance between everyone who worked on that EP in the
Oh,
pandemic. If you were to add up the miles between all of our houses, that was it.
awesome! That's cool.
So 654 seconds is the length of those three songs put together until you put them on a streaming service, and then they bump it a couple seconds, so it kind of ruins your vibe. But
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And then 1023, we really wanted, um, we knew we were onto a special set of songs, and we started working on this in October of 2023 with Dave Roof up at Rooftop Recording.
Oh, all
And
right.
we wanted it to be a snapshot of that place in time, and we've just kind of kept that number thing going.
That's cool. That's very cool. Uh, so I like to ask the question just to get some perspective on your journeys through music and what were your early influences? Why did you want to play an instrument and play in a band? Because there, to me, there's two different levels of like desire there. One, people, everyone should try to play an instrument if they want, but I think it takes another level of drive and commitment to actually want to play with other people in a band, because it can be just as fulfilling to sit in your room and jam. But some people want to take it to the next level and then, even higher to like play out live and stuff. So, thinking of all that, I don't know who wants to start as far as how you got into music and wanting to play in a band.
You want to go first, Brian?
I think I can. Yeah. Well, a big nod to both of my parents. They had been playing, they were big on music, and I kind of come from a musical family, and so that started early, but I can remember being young and like my dad putting on records and just cranking them up through a stereo in the family room. And I have memories of being on like a marble coffee table as a kid with some sort of makeshift microphone. And I was the lead singer in my own band in that mindset. So and then I just remember sort of always having a Walkman, a tape deck with me everywhere I went as a kid. Riding on the school bus to and from, it was Walkman, then CDs, then every version of mobile music you could have,
Yeah.
and then ridiculously big CD books. And so I just kind of always feel like I was listening to music so much. And then at some point, um, I know my parents bought me a keyboard, and I loved playing the keyboard and wasn't really interested in lessons, but it was just fun to make pretty notes and pretty little things on it. And then I had some friends that got guitars, and then I remember a birthday party at a buddy's house where this was the friend of yours that had the older brother who, when you went into their bedroom with their bunk beds, he had, and I'll never forget it. I know I could pick out every detail. He had this massive PV amp
Oh.
and all these guitars, and it was obnoxiously loud. And just going in there and listening to him play whatever he was playing, I just thought it was so cool. And then we went to their basement. Again, this was like at a birthday party, and all these kids are there, and in the basement they had a PA system, and they had a huge chrome Slingerland drum kit. I don't remember how many pieces, but it was a lot, probably 4 mounted toms,
Wow.
3 floor toms, everything they could throw at it. It was just this awesome kit. And the kid whose birthday it was, he could play, his brother could play, and then all of us there at the birthday party started taking turns playing this drum kit. And I had never touched a drum kit before, but I was just listening to what they were doing, and then it was my turn, and I was somewhat able to carry a beat,
Oh,
and
shit.
one of my friends said, "I didn't know you played." And I was like, "I don't." And he said, "Well, you should." So so that kind of started that in my head, and my dad had a drum kit in our basement when I was really young, and I have vague memories of sitting up there with my feet dangling off the throne. I couldn't touch
Yeah.
pedals. um, but I just think that it was sort of always in the corner of my mind that, hey, this music thing is just sort of part of your history. And so I want to say I was about 15, I think, when I bought my first real drum kit. And I think I was in a band by the end of that year, just with, whatever friend you had that could play
Right.
guitar, somebody with a microphone that we would plug into probably a guitar amp, because
Right.
we had, just nothing. And it really all started there. And I think, s- like, truly, sincerely, from that age, I've always pursued or been in some form of band. And it just kind of kept going. It's crazy all this time later to look at how long you've been doing something like that.
Right.
Um, so yeah, and influences, were definitely derived from what my parents were listening to. So the obvious Led Zeppelins and Aerosmith. I was pretty infatuated with Aerosmith as a kid, just because I knew the lyrics of the songs. And
Yeah.
Mrs. Doubtfire came out, and there was all this stuff in that era that was just big and glam.
Yeah.
And so, it just spiraled through that, and then starting to get to the age where I could go to shows with friends, underage, with big X's on your hands, and go into a lot of punk shows were the big thing. So we would go to these pop-up punk shows. I mean, I saw a punk show in a roller skate rink one time.
Oh, cool.
Um, yeah. So, and I grew up in Northeast Ohio, so this is kind of where all that stuff took place. And so really big into punk stuff. And then I think just as I got older, I started to really get into the 90s, Seattle grunge and all that stuff. So there was no turning back. I mean, once I got to that point, it was just huge. And yeah, I think
Nice.
everybody has a point in their life where they look back and they say, like, how did we get here after all this? And that's kind of, at this point, just don't look back, just keep going. So
That's right. Awesome, man. That's cool. James, how about you?
Yeah, so my dad is like a killer guitar player, like 80s shred style forever.
Oh, really?
Um,
Wow. Cool.
oh yeah, so he running Steve Vai records back to front. It's
Fuck.
crazy. Yeah,
That is
exactly.
crazy. Shit.
Um, and my mom kind of listened to metal too, but kind of on the lighter side. She was like your Van Halen, your Slaughter, your Poison,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And my dad was more Overkill, Metal Church, uh, you know, Megadeth, Metallica, obviously.
Yeah, your dad
Um,
your
and then
dad sounds cool as hell.
yeah. And so, and both sides would land on like Queensryche and,
Yeah.
stuff like that. And so, but it was for me, it was watching my dad play Iron Maiden record. Like I remember him playing um Rest in Peace, like just start to
Yeah.
finish and just being like, what the hell? Um and the first little like dual guitar harmony thing I learned, I was like done. I was like, okay,
All right.
this is it for me. So Iron Maiden was why I played guitar. And then I got into like proggy stuff for a while. I was like listening to tons of Dream Theater and Fate's Warning and things like that.
Nice.
Um, and then there was always Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, and all that stuff going on in the house too. Um, and as the 90s hit, I started like listening to like singer-songwriters like Ben Harper, um, and then some guys like Monty Montgomery, who like played crazy
Oh,
guitar but also
man.
did some
Monty
singer-songwriter
Montgomery.
stuff.
I saw that dude
Yeah.
live. He's fucking awesome, man.
Yeah, no, he's just insane what he does.
Yeah.
Uh, Um, and then, getting into like even like yeah, at the in 1 week I could be listening to Euthanasia by Megadeth and like Edmund McCain like back to back. And that was just kind of that's kind of how my brain's always been. Um, and so, it just I joined choir. So I started singing and started
Uh-huh.
learning how to do that. And all the girls in choir wanted to sing Faith Hill songs and whatever at the pop shows. So I learned all those on guitar because they
Nice.
didn't want to do it to piano. And you just kind of start working through all these things. I do remember uh, the first drummer I jammed with was a buddy of mine. He's still in bands. He plays. Shout out to Them Teeth. They do some great, awesome metal stuff. His name is Adam Tatro, and it was the one time I could talk my mom on Christmas into drop me off at his house. I had got an amp for Christmas. He had got a drum set, and we thought we could play some Black Sabbath songs. We could not, but that's kind of the intro around like sixth, seventh grade.
Yeah.
Um, then yeah, just like Brian, you just kind of go from band to band to band. And for whatever reasons, some things don't work out or whatever. But I think the number one thing that when I got really back into music and doing the singer-songwriter thing that I was missing was that orchestral side of just hearing the other parts in your head.
Okay, yeah.
Um, and I think that's why I yearned for a band again, so badly. And there's nothing cooler than being in a room like with other musicians and like they play something that you're like, oh, I heard something just like that. That's awesome. But
Yeah,
I think what's even better is when they play something even cooler that you weren't expecting and it lands there. And, I think that's what this band does more so than any other band I've ever been in.
that's cool. Yeah. There's a magic to the, being with other musicians and crafting some tunes and just watching that unfold. That was a draw for me way back in the day, and it's something I always think about every once in a while. But I don't have any time to do any of that shit. uh,
It's funny. Like once you get in a band, all of a sudden everyone else wants you to be in a band with them
Right.
because I swear no one talked to me for years about being in a band. And then like I had a band and it's like, hey, we should do this. Hey, we should do that. And it's like I got time for one thing, man.
yeah, this is all I can do, dude. Sorry. So there was a question from the singers, and they said, "Riding shotgun has a country feel. Is that a one-off, or do you plan to play more like it?"
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely more in the tank as far as songs like that goes. It's funny when I wrote that song, I was actually not listening to country, and I agree, it does have a country vibe to it. I was actually listening to the Beatles put out a compilation called One forever ago, and I think I just listened to it for 3 weeks straight. And at that time, I had been listening to all that proggy music I was talking about. So everything I was writing was like crazy riffs and like
Yeah.
you know add 9 plus 11 chords and just whatever else I could possibly see in a Dream Theater tab book. And I said I'm gonna write the simplest song I ever can. like what is the simplest thing? And so G D C D
There you
E
go.
minor.
Yeah.
That's really how that came about. So once again, here we are talking about the Beatles as that
Well,
tends to happen.
yeah. I mean, that is um, I guess, cornerstone piece of music history, really, and their music is still timeless. Them, Black Sabbath, I mean, that music just lives on and on. And there's a bunch of others, obviously. Um, but yeah, the the Beatles end up being a touchstone, I think, for a lot of people that get into music. Some people are not, necessarily hip into it. And I'll be honest, when I was a teenager, I was like, I have no time for this. I'm all
Right.
about Ozzy and you know Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, and that's what I care about. And then I got into thrash, and I'm like, that's all I want to listen to now. So, and it was like, I don't know, probably in the last 20 years that I actually I mean, I like the White Album just because that tune, She's So Heavy.
Yeah.
And Corner did a cover of it, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. So otherwise, I was like, you knew Rocky Raccoon and Blackbird and stuff because you'd heard them so many times, but you just hadn't thought about it. And it
I
wasn't
think when
until
I
20 years ago that I was like, holy shit, why haven't I been listening to Revolver and Abbey Road and Let It Be, and yeah.
I think the thing that I take away from going back and listening to them, and I don't, they're not a band like I listen to all the time, but I always get like crazy production ideas when you go back and listen to how they recorded some of that stuff. Like you have headphones
Oh
in,
yeah,
you're like, oh wow,
yeah.
like that's that was nuts.
Yeah, yeah. And what was that? I think it was Let It Be, right? That documentary that basically
Yeah.
just a bunch of film. I mean, that is kind of an insightful thing because my wife was bored as shit watching that, and I was just like glued to it because I was like, this is exactly what it was like being in a band. Half the time you're just fucking around. Somebody starts doing something, and you're dicking around with something else, and then but those guys are just like sitting. Let's let the tapes roll for hours and hours, video and everything. Like holy shit! But
Yeah.
they were the Beatles, and they were at the top of the game right then, right? So or at the
Yeah,
time, I
they had no
guess.
concern. They had no
Yeah.
concern of what tape costed at that time.
Yeah, yeah. Let's run video. Let's take pictures. Whatever. We don't care. Let's do a concert
Right.
on the roof. Screw it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, fantastic. So another question I like to ask is about again going back in time. What was the very first concert that you went to? Brian, how
Oh
about you?
boy. So I the first big concert I can remember going to was Motley Crue, Megadeth, and Anthrax.
Oh wow.
Yes.
Yeah, it was absolutely wild. It did not disappoint. It was everything that I thought a concert should be. And, I just remember props up on the stage with like, I think they were semi trucks. And I think Vince Neil rode out on a motorcycle to the microphone. Um, there were dancing girls up in cages and stuff. It was so over the top. And I remember not being quite as familiar with Anthrax at the time. I was really there for Megadeth, I guess. But
Yeah.
that's what sparked Anthrax for me when I saw
Oh.
those guys get up. And I was like, oh my God. And to this day, I love being wowed by, the opener or whoever, is on the bill that you sort of dismiss when you buy the ticket. And then you
Yeah.
get there and you're like, oh my God.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I love that too.
that happens all the time. And that is really a cool way to find new music and sort of see what other people are doing and then piece together how it contributes to that show and why it makes sense, or even if it doesn't make sense, that almost helps it make sense. So
Right.
that was a really big show. And I think that was kind of when I caught the concert bug because I was young. I think I was chaperone to that show, and this was just such a big event and just really felt special. So yeah.
Cool. James, how about you?
I saw that show about 2 days later.
Right.
um Brian and I always joke we saw all the same tours, but I saw them in Detroit and he saw them in Cleveland.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And it's
But
true. I mean,
my first yeah, yep. My first concert was Ozzy, Korn on their first record. This would be the Osmosis tour.
Oh.
And I think Prong was the opener.
Oh wow. Kind of a diverse mix.
So I watched Korn get booed off the stage, and I remember sitting there being like, "That's going to be the coolest band ever soon." And I was right. It's like a 13-year-old, however old I was. But Ozzy, I mean, he just blew my mind. I mean, it was otherworldly.
That's cool.
He was spraying the fire hose all over every. Yeah, he did. I think it was the second leg of the tour, so he he was not just doing like everything off of osmosis. He was, it was like a lot of the back catalog.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I mean, just totally
Awesome.
life changing.
Awesome. So on the same same I guess vibe or vine, and as far as concerts, what's the one or two of your most like favorite concerts you've seen?
Hmm.
Oh, I mean, so I've followed everything Maynard has ever done, and um, still to this day, seeing Tool in concert, seeing A Perfect Circle in concert, and seeing Pussifer in concert,
Nice.
that's home base for me. I mean, that's everything about the show and the music. By that time, I've run those records so many times that I'm literally in the music. I'm in the kick drum. I'm in the guitar. So, I think that's kind of the same way people of my parents' generations felt about Pink Floyd, when they,
Oh yeah.
um, my dad would tell the story of seeing Pink Floyd at Blossom Music Center in Cleveland, and it was one of the first times that they had run a different type of stereo setup where it wasn't just left right audio. I think it was actually more of like a surround.
Oh, crazy.
He would know the name of it. He remembers the name of that type of concert, but it was something that only Pink Floyd was doing. And would tell this story of this guy who couldn't get into the concert and hopped the fence, and the police are chasing him, and he's running into the crowd, and the crowd would open up just for him, and then they'd shut and not let the police in. And and eventually this guy had run all over this place. The police just gave up, and I guess they did catch up with him, but it was in front of everybody, and they shook his hand, and he was into the concert. So,
Oh man.
um,
Hell yeah.
but that that feeling and that sort of attachment to the music and everything that made that band so great in that era, I feel that way about Tool and Perfect Circle, and so that's kind of that's my big attachment, I would
Awesome.
say, for shows. And they put on such great shows. And
Yeah. Did you go to
yeah,
Sesanta or however they say it, the at Maynard 60th over at Pine Knob with
no, I did
I
not
think
go to that.
Pussifer, Perfect Circle, and Primus. Yeah,
Yes, I have
it's
friends that
awesome.
went, and yeah, I just try to pretend like that didn't happen because I would have loved to have been there.
Yeah, that was
Other than that, though, yeah, every time they've been around, I've at least seen them once on every album tour, or even like during the pandemic, Pussifer put out this video of their Arcosante concert in the desert, and it was all like live. And if anybody hasn't seen that, I highly recommend checking that out too, because it's incredible. But
that,
yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah,
yeah,
I was because of my age, I've been able to see some bands early on, and so I got to actually like I am also a huge Tool fan. I got to see Tool on the second stage of Lollapalooza, like when they were just getting started. Like
wow,
nobody knew who they were. Like it's 100 degrees. We were in Milan when they played there, and it's it's at the Milan Speedway, and so it's just dirt, and it's like I said, 100 degrees. There's like a mosh pit going. Maynard's on stage, with his at that time he had the mohawk,
yeah.
and he's just getting people going, and it's just like a little dust tornado of all these people moshing and stuff. It was so cool, and I was like, "Who is this band?" We were like immediately drawn. We were like hanging out by our car waiting for, the main stage. I might have been Rage Against the Machine, but we are like, "Oh, what is that band?" We immediately like beeline right there. I'm like, "Oh," and from then I was like, "This is one of my most favorite bands, Tool." There it
Yeah.
is. Yeah,
Oh yeah, that's incredible.
yeah. James, how about you?
Well, to touch on a couple things before I get to mine, like on one of Ozfest things, I had a similar moment that you had with Tool at Lollapalooza with System of the Down. They were on
Oh
like
yeah.
they weren't even down on the stage. They were like up in the merch area on the stage they would set up there.
Yeah.
And they were playing like Sugar and stuff like that off of the first. And I remember having a similar moment of when I saw Corn first. I was just like, whatever that is going to be the coolest thing ever. Because
Right.
you had Surge just going, ah!
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it was just killer. And to Brian on the pandemic thing, like a band that I love a lot named Biffy Clyro, um, from Scotland, like they did a totally awesome video, like a live video to go with an album they put out during the pandemic that was like shot in like this little like theater. It was super cool.
Awesome.
So if anyone wants to check that out,
That
but
band.
mine are kind.
I was just gonna say that band kicks ass.
Yes,
Oh yeah.
tons of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But I think mine are kind of like because of I've seen a ton of awesome concerts, but I think it's the specifics of certain concerts that seem to stick with me.
Uh,
I took my mom and dad to see Heart because Heart is one of her favorite bands,
oh, nice.
and their band got stuck in like Salt Lake City or something. And so like it was just the two sisters, and they talked about how Guitar Center brought out all these instruments for them, and they just like rotated around the stage and like we're playing mandolin, acoustic guitars, bass, like they
Wow.
had like a little like kick trigger, piano, and they just like did all their songs, but just like the two of them.
Wow.
And I just remember being like blown away by the ability because I I went back home and was like, I could not do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that concert always sticks out to me because I was just like blown away by the caliber of musicianship that they both had.
Right.
And then I mean, Heart's got bangers. I mean,
Yeah.
they
Oh,
just do.
yeah. Yeah. I love Heart.
And then I saw it was the 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence Dream Theater tour um, that they did with Queensryche.
Oh,
And
wow.
Queensryche was amazing. Dream Theater was amazing. But they did a 3-song medley at the end where they did like they did a Dream Theater song where Jeff Tate sang lead vocals and the bands kind of traded what they did. And then they did a Queensryche song where Dream Theater did the vocals. I think they did Take Hold of the Flame,
Nice.
which was killer to hear. But
Yeah.
then they did a Pink Floyd medley to end the night.
Oh,
And
man.
I remember like I remember just standing there and being like, and Jeff Tate singing the low part and James LaBrie singing the high parts. And like, I was just like, what the hell this is like perfection right now.
Yeah.
I always remember those concert moments.
That's awesome. Uh, when you were talking about Dream Theater, one of my favorite albums they did is that one that has covers. They do Elton John's "Funeral for a Friend."
I change the seasons.
Yeah, yeah, love that album. So
Yeah.
good. Love those
Yep.
covers. They do some. I think Achilles' Last Stand,
Mm-hmm.
which is probably it is my most favorite Led Zeppelin song of all
Yeah,
time.
I think they do Perfect Strangers by Deep Purple. That
Yeah,
sounds killer on
yeah,
that too.
yeah. That's a tune that I think gets ignored sometimes because
Yes.
everybody looks at old Deep Purple and kind of forgets that album, but which is stellar, really.
Yep.
Um, so what else is happening in the future for Head Full of Ghosts? And if you tell me anything, think forward like into September because this won't come out till late September. Any concerts or anything going on?
Yeah, we
Brian, did
do
you
have.
go ahead?
I was gonna say we given the fact that we do have a show coming up soon, but at this point that's kind of where we're starting to book out into the winter. We are gonna do a show at is it Ore Creek, I think. That's gonna be revisiting sort of the acoustic
Oh, cool.
style that we started with in a sense.
Like the cidery place?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that they do music there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did not know that. Shit. Well, when is that? Do you know?
Let me look. Yeah. Now it's kind of fun having to look at a calendar and knowing. Let's see.
Yeah.
That's September 21st.
Oh. Let's see what I got
And
going on.
yeah, so that, that's going to be fun because we've done that once before. Last year in the fall, we played a festival where it was just a crash course in crushing all this electric music into this acoustic format again.
Right.
Um, but we had so much fun with it. It was seriously so much fun, and I think for each band member, everything changes a little bit. Your volume's lower.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe the most change might be for me, because I have to translate all those drum parts back into my hands
Yeah.
essentially, and a completely different surface area. But we took that gig knowing that it would be a fun challenge, and it's something I think that we would like to be able to do, and eventually maybe implement that into places that we can play if they're not suitable for full rock shows. We can
Right.
break
Right.
things down. So that'll be interesting. And then we do a big Halloween show every year. The last couple years we've done it at the Ipsy Ale House, and it plays well into the cliche, the name of the band and all that. But we do all the we instrumentally put the thing together all in house. So we'll book the entire night. We
Oh,
will bring
nice.
in different kinds of acts. And last year was phenomenal. We had a guy named Beatbox Jake who plays metal riffs over beatboxes through a looper, and um so it was so neat to bring all these different guys in, and we would
Yeah.
start with some singer-songwriters, kind of work our way up to us closing the night out, and have costume contests. And we
Very
have some
cool.
friends that have a podcast, the Belief Hole podcast, which is awesome. So shout out to them. But they showed up and were kind of part of the show as well. So
Awesome. That's
um,
awesome.
that'll be the weekend before Halloween. So that's October 26th at the Ale House. And then we start getting into some space in the winter where that's kind of where we're starting to fill in some dates. So
Cool. Awesome.
yeah.
Well, I'm hoping I can get out to a show because definitely love the music, and I think it would be cool to just experience the music live and actually meet you guys in person.
Yeah, likewise, man. Definitely.
Awesome.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Well, guys, I want to thank you so much for being on Fans with Bands. I just have one last question, and that is pineapple or no pineapple on pizza?
Wow.
Ooh. One of my kids is going to be so mad at me, but no pineapple.
All right. All right.
I say no as well.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I'm whatever pizza's awesome, whatever you want, totally fine. But I'm with you guys. I mean, pineapple has its place, and it's not on the pizza. It needs to be
Right.
somewhere else, like in a salad. I don't know, an upside down cake. Don't sweet and savory. It's not for me. So I'm glad you guys are on the same page.
Yes, definitely.
Awesome. Well, guys,
Well,
thanks
thanks
again.
so much. Yeah, I was going to say thanks for having us.
Yeah, hell yeah. It was great to talk with you guys. And like I said, the music's fantastic, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys live. All right,
Thank you
guys.
so much.
Yeah, take care.
All right, you
You
too.
too.
Many thanks to James and Brian from Head Full of Ghosts for joining me on this episode of Fans with Bands. I very much enjoyed talking with these guys about how they got into their music, their influences, and what propels them forward today. I really love the story behind their name as well. Be on the lookout for shows later this fall, including a rumored Halloween gig at Ipsy Ale House. See the show notes for all the details and links. Bands are nothing without you, the fans. Purchasing music and merchandise is critical to their survival. If you can help out your favorite bands, please do. If you're in Michigan, consider following the Playing in Detroit area tonight and SE for Southeast Michigan Music Facebook pages. They are fantastic places for fans and bands to support each other and share our combined love of music. Thank you all so much for listening. Be sure to hit subscribe on your favorite podcast service to get each and every episode of Fans with Bands. Spread the word by rating the show, telling your friends, telling your neighbors, telling your family, telling your priest, tell everyone, and leave a comment. We want to hear what you think. You can keep in touch by following us on social media. This is a Life in Michigan production. Until next time, be well and kick out the jams. Bands are nothing without you, the fans. Purchasing music and merchandise is critical to their survival. If you can help out your favorite bands, please do. If you're in Michigan, consider following the Playing in Detroit Area Tonight and SE for Southeast Michigan Music Facebook pages. They are fantastic places for fans and bands to support each other and share our combined love of music. Thank you all so much for listening. Be sure to hit subscribe on your favorite podcast service to get each and every episode of Fans with Bands. Spread the word by rating the show, telling your friends, telling your neighbors, telling your family, telling your priest, tell everyone, and leave a comment. We want to hear what you think. You can keep in touch by following us on social media. This is a Life in Michigan production. Until next time, be well and kick out the jams.